particular debate. And we're really excited because this is one of the premier races that are going on right now, I would say, in the region. And so we're really excited and really thankful that the candidates took time out of their busy schedules to be with us tonight. Let me first start off by thanking our co-host, the Coalition for Smarter Growth. Jane, she's a co-host on this webinar right now, but she is equal partner in making all of this happen. So we want to extend our thank you to the Coalition for Smarter Growth. I am Jeremiah Lowry. I'm the Advocacy Director at the Washington Area Bicycle Association. We got Peter Gray, who's on here. He's on the board. I'm gonna say he's still on the board of WABA. And also let me thank our co-sponsors, Young People for Progress, Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets, Tacoma Park Mobilization, Greater Washington, and Jews United for Justice. This event is being recorded live, and so we'll be sending out a copy to our members and supporters after the event. Let's get it started. We have a lot of questions, so we don't have an awful lot of time. So I'm going to start off by introducing Jordan. He is a transportation reporter with WAMU, Jordan Pascale. We're really excited to have Jordan step in and moderate, and we're so thankful that he can be with us here tonight. And so I am going to throw it over to Jordan.
Well, thanks so much for having me, candidates. Thank you for joining us. I'll cover that and a little bit about our candidates, but just to introduce everyone, joining us in alphabetical order today is David Blair. He's a nonprofit leader and former healthcare business executive, and he lives in Potomac. Marc Elrich was elected county executive in 2018 after serving on the council since 2006. He lives in Tacoma Park. Tom Hucker has served on the council since 2015. He lives in Silver Spring, and Hans Riemer has served on the council since 2010. He lives in Tacoma Park. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for being here. Again, I'm Jordan Pascale. I cover transportation for WMU Public Radio and DCS. I'm not quite a Montgomery County resident. I can see Montgomery County out my window from Tacoma. So definitely interested in the answers, definitely spend a lot of time in the county. So a little bit on the format tonight. We'll have 3 rounds of questions formulated with the help of our sponsors. We'll start with some longer 2-minute answers, a lightning round with yes, no questions. We'll ask you to do thumbs up or thumbs down, and a series of questions where you'll have about a minute to answer. Questions will be posted in the chat if you need to reference those again. And we'll also have a timer on the screen, so please keep your answers as close to time as possible. We have a lot to get through and a lot of candidates, so we want to hear as much as we can. So try to keep the time if you can. And a reminder, this is a forum, not a debate, so keep that in mind as you go through your answers. We're going to try to keep rebuttals down to a minimum, just given how much time we have. But just to start, we'll first open this up to David Blair. Our first question is on land use and transportation. And the question is, transit service is more efficient when people live closer to transit stations. I live just by Tacoma, so I know this. But how can the county approach land use and planning in a way that supports transit?
Well, Jordan, thank you. And it's great to be with you this evening, and I appreciate you hosting. A great first question. Yeah, absolutely. We need people want to live near where they work, right? And so a lot of that needs to be accessible, and through public transit, we can make that happen. And so when we think about the land that is available for housing developments, we have a lot of it already, right? So if you think about Shady Grove Metro or White Flint, Forest Glen, the future Purple Line stations, these are prime real estate areas where we could build mixed income, mixed use neighborhoods. This is where people want to live. It's where businesses want to thrive, and that's got to be a priority. But one of the biggest challenges that I see, and if we think about kind of the root cause why these developments aren't being developed, is the lack of jobs. And in fact, White Flint has been zoned properly for years. And when the developers are asked, okay, so why aren't you developing White Flint with mixed income, mixed use developments? They say, well, the jobs aren't here. And they intuitively know, back to what I said, people want to live near where they work. And so I've put a significant amount of effort over the past, really almost the past decade, meeting with literally hundreds of business leaders, community leaders, about how we can get the economy going here, how we can actually start creating jobs here, because that'll drive the housing, and then that'll improve the quality of life. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to County Executive Elrich. And County Executive might still be on mute there.
Okay, I'm not mute anymore. So I'm going to start, oddly enough, by agreeing with part of what David said at the end there. I mean, the interviews of the White Flint developers and other developers have indicated that they cite jobs as one of the major factors in the lack of housing construction. There's 45,000 housing units in a pipeline, which means they could be built pretty much tomorrow if somebody went and pulled their permits. They don't need to be approved, but they're not being built. The county's had 10 million square feet of vacant office and commercial space for more than a decade now. And those projects aren't being filled, let alone being built. And the pipeline for commercial is millions of square feet also not being built. So jobs are an issue. I've made a big effort to bring development to White Flint. We're working with WAMUTA on a joint development agreement to focus life sciences development around White Flint. This is going to be a big deal. Virtually every developer there has at least one project now that's turned toward life sciences. So I think, we're on the right track in terms of trying to build Montgomery County's economy back, which is good news. The other problem, though, is affordability. And, in the effort to make things dense, the county, I think, has overemphasized height and density, because the cost per square foot to build a high rise means that the units being built are literally not affordable. And all you've got to do is look at the buildings being built in Bethesda today. And while we get our 15% MPDUs, the prices of the units above that start going up to $2,500 for an efficiency or one bedroom, cross $3,000 for a two bedroom. And so it's flat out not affordable. If the county, instead of focusing on high rise, had focused more on 7 to 10 story buildings that can be built in stick, that is half the price of construction, we'd be able to build more affordable units. It would be easier for the county to subsidize units down to affordability. And I know that you can actually see this in a couple of the projects that are starting now, including Brian Folger's project, where instead of building to the full height capacity, they're building at lower heights, which means the units are going to be more affordable. So I think we've zoned the right places. I think we overzoned it in terms of height and density. But if we can get that right, or if the market just forces them to build like some of the ones are doing anyway, and they just surrender and don't wait for a 20-story building, I think we'll be able to move things forward. Am I out of time?
Yeah, we'll
Yep.
stop that there. Councilmember Riemer, how do we build land use and transit in a way that works together?
Thank you. Well, that is the heart of the work that we do in county government. My vision for our county is that everyone has safe, high quality options for how they can get around. And I care about public transportation because I care about social justice. And I know that, like public education, public transportation is essential for our vision to promote opportunity. I've been a bus rider, I've been a metro rider, I've been a walker and a bike commuter, and I've been a driver too. And I've been a consistent champion at the council for housing near transit, because this county has to create city centers that can drive our future prosperity and our success. And we need places that young workers and empty nesters alike can find places to live, and they can spend time with their family and friends, and they can enjoy great restaurants and have easy access to cultural attractions, whether it's the movies or heading down to the Smithsonian. And that's our future. We have the rural areas and we have the suburban areas, but what we need are the amazing urban places where you can walk and bike, where companies that want to locate because the workforce wants to be there, whether they're right out of college or they're the CEO of a rising technology company, that's where they want to be. Places that our kids are going to want to come back to, and places that our parents can be excited to downsize into. And transportation is one of the essential keys. Housing and transportation go together, and we have to make those changes. At the council, I have been a relentless champion for smart growth development, advancing critical plans like downtown Bethesda, up and down Rock Rockville Pike, the Purple Line corridor, all the station areas around the Purple Line corridor, the MARC train station areas, all of those work together to create possibilities for our future. But we do need stronger economic development. We have to recover from this COVID recovery. And if you look at the trend line, this county is not doing as well as it should be on economic development. We are behind the pace regionally and nationally. We don't have as many jobs as we used to, believe it or not, let alone how many we should have created if we were even keeping pace. So we need to do all of these things together, and I hope you'll support me to get it done. Thanks.
Thank you. And Council Member Hucker, just to recap the question, how can the county approach land use and planning in a way that supports transit?
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for the question, Jordan. Sorry, I had an unworking link. Sorry to join you late here. That is, as Hans said, exactly what we do at the council all the time. We do in the Transportation Committee and in the Fed Committee and in full council. I've been in this space for a very long time. I served in Annapolis in 8 years as a lawmaker on the Environmental Matters Committee before serving on the county council, and was one of the original sponsors under Governor O'Malley of the Transit-Oriented Development Bill that set up our whole framework of transit-oriented development for the state. That's exactly right. We need to really emphasize, there's many things holding it back. We need to double down on our housing near transit. There's no question about that. And there are many barriers that stand in the way of that. We need land use that also facilitates for people to get from their current housing to transit. And that means bus lines that really work. That means sidewalks and bikeways. That means infrastructure at our transit stations like bike lockers so that people can feel safe getting from their house to a transit station. There's also in certain areas a lack of county investment. We could have more development in White Flint if we invested in the metro entrance there. And that is just something we're going to have to bite the bullet and do if we want the investment we really want. We also need the state and federal money to invest in the CCT to unlock the jobs in that corridor and to bring people to the metro. And we need WMATA. We need to work more constructively with WMATA. Developers will tell you over and over that WMATA is not very focused on development at their transit stations. They've historically made it hard. I think they're moving in the right direction, but now under a new CEO, they'll have to really redouble their efforts to develop at transit stations. And finally, that's exactly right. We have to restart the Montgomery County economy. There is no reason that we were losing jobs pre-COVID during a huge expansion. We're still lagging the region. We need to build our jobs economy to invest in everything that's in the pedestrian and the bike master plans that my committee and the full council have passed.
Thank you so much for those answers. North Bethesda, White Flint, we won't get to that, but just wanted to point in North Bethesda. But next question is on bus rapid transit. Since 2013, the county has envisioned a bus rapid transit network. Since then, only the Flash BRT line has opened and without dedicated lanes. Is BRT the right vision? And if so, how can the county executive move the BRT plan forward? We'll go ahead and start with County Executive Elrich.
I'm really glad you asked that question because I'm actually the architect of the BRT network. I proposed this network in about 2008. Almost the entire network wound up being adopted by Parking Planning and the Master Plan of Transportation. I started at a COG meeting when they showed us the climate change numbers and CO2 numbers that were projected. And I said to my colleague, Mike Knapp was on the COG with me, and I said, we're going to need more people to ride buses and transit. And he said, people aren't going to ride buses and not everybody's going to ride transit. And so I said, I don't need everybody to ride transit. So we actually did a study, had somebody do a study about how many people we had to switch in order to make a meaningful difference in CO2. And it was not everybody. It was far from everybody. So we laid out this network. We used the origin destination pairs. It's about 100 lane miles of network. And I literally all pretty much what I proposed was adopted. The problem's been money. The county has no money. Our bonding authority has actually been reduced by the council every year. It was being reduced. I was on the council last and they've continued to reduce it. You can't build stuff without money. I've made a proposal. We have the authority now to build what are called the special taxing districts. It's what Virginia does. I've made a proposal to swap out the impact taxes on development, which would actually make development cheaper, and swap them for special taxing districts, particularly in these urbanizing areas, which would give us a stream of money like they do in Virginia. This is exactly what they do in Northern Virginia. It gives them a stream of money they can bond against. And if I have a stream of money I can bond against, I can float the bonds and build the projects. Yes, we're trying to get federal money. Yes, we're trying to get more state money. But at the end of the day, you can only look to other people so long before you realize if nobody else is going to step up, we have to be willing to step up. So I love your question because I'm the architect of the plan. I'm trying to figure out how to get it financed, and we're going in for federal funding for the first 2 lines this year.
Thanks so much. Councilmember Riemer.
Well, thank you. Bus rapid transit is a terrific solution in certain uses, in certain locations. I think the county executive certainly deserves some credit for putting a spotlight on this issue. I also think the county really got carried away with planning for bus rapid transit and spent a tremendous amount of effort drawing up plans on paper and not nearly enough actually figuring out how to get it done. And in fact, last year at the Transportation Committee, Councilmember Glass and I, and joined by Councilmember Hucker, chair, we had to push back really hard on the county executive's proposal for bus rapid transit on Route 29, because the design that we were given was one that was going to create a weak system that wouldn't really be effective at moving people quickly on bus rapid transit, frankly, because of neighborhood opposition. And that's a repeated pattern that we see with the county executive. So I don't really think there's much different today than there was before he took office on this issue as far as actual service on the ground. And I think the whole focus has been too broad and not focused enough. We ought to be focusing on building specific line, really make a big investment in a specific location with what we can afford locally, and then go after state and federal money to the extent that we can get it. And I think we could be making a lot more progress, frankly, than we are. But I am looking forward to moving forward on bus rapid transit, particularly on 29 and Rockville Pike and Veers Mill. What I like about it is it gives us a way to rip up all of those major highways and rebuild them as pedestrian and bike friendly corridors that are served by public transit. That's what this county needs. We have these broad, wide highways that are dangerous, they're unpeople friendly, and they're really, they're inconsistent with our vision of the future. So getting more funding for bus rapid transit is going to help us rebuild Rockville Pike, Veers Mill, Route 29, you name it, eventually. And we will build the city centers that we need in this county.
Thank you. And Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Jordan. So I support true bus rapid transit. And I believe true bus rapid transit means dedicated lanes and a regional solution. And unfortunately, what we have on 29 is neither, right? It's mostly on non-dedicated lanes, on shared lanes, and it's not regional. I mean, when I think about 29, why isn't it going up to Maple Lawn or even to Columbia? And as the county executive suggested, he proposed this in 2008. And since that time, we just have 14 miles of that BRT. So you don't need a calculator or a calendar to figure out that. So it took us 14 years to get 14 miles. So at that pace, like, we'll never address our transit challenges that we have. So I would focus on, okay, so what can we actually do that's meaningful? How can we control our own destiny? Well, how about we start with our ride-on buses? So what's alarming is the ridership on our ride-on buses dropped 25% pre-pandemic. So from 2012 to 2019, dropped 25%. Who was sounding the alarm bells when that ridership was dropping? I proposed 4 years ago, make ride-on buses free. I'm glad we've got that in place now. Let's make it permanent. I also talked about, we've got to examine our bus routes and our bus stops. This is an incredibly easy thing to do. Other cities have done this and the results are phenomenal. I think I was reading recently about Houston, they did it. And they saw, in Houston, they saw, I think it was something like a 8-9% increase right out of the gate during the weekdays. And then on the weekends, it was even higher, like 15-20%. So this is something that we can do. And here's the wonderful thing about it. It's not expensive. We don't need to wait for state funding or federal funding. These are solutions that we could implement right away. And I would also say we need a better technology solution or more reliable technology solution to go along with that. I hear too often that the mobile app doesn't work properly. So those are 3 things that we could do with something that's in place today.
Thank you for that answer. And Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you. I'm a big supporter of our bus rapid transit network. I really want to see it implemented properly. I've consistently voted not just to fund it, but also to expand it. And certainly, as Mark said, he deserves credit for getting the ball rolling with the concept, as does County Executive Leggett for ordering up the first buses and approving the line, which runs entirely in my district from Burtonsville to Silver Spring. I was at all the community meetings on this as we were planning it and promising it, and saw up close what we promised our community, which was a first-class product in dedicated lanes. And like many of our projects, unfortunately, in the last few years, BRT has suffered from both lofty rhetoric and big promises, but poor execution. We got diesel buses, not electric ones. They're still not in dedicated lanes. We have insufficient investment in connectivity. So people who live in those low density communities near our bus stations don't always feel safe walking and biking to the BRT stations. And we lose far too many of our pedestrians running across US 29 and don't have the infrastructure to support our pedestrians and the commitment from State Highway Division 0 that we need. It also doesn't come as often as it should. It comes every 15 minutes and our regular ride-on comes more often in Metro Bus. So people get on the first bus that comes. And it also doesn't stop at the Silver Spring Transit Center where riders can connect to other bus lines. So overall, the community, and these are all my constituents up and down the corridor, they're disappointed in the flash bus, unnecessarily so. I've consistently voted to appropriate additional funds to speed up the design, including the recent vote Hans mentioned, to reject the county exec's proposal to insist on dedicated lanes that the community wants. That will drive our ridership. We're also weak on the pursuit of federal and state dollars. I've joined Congressman Brown to talk to Secretary Buttigieg about this. He didn't know about this or our 5 other approved projects because we don't have lobby firms on Capitol Hill or on Annapolis to support our delegation and fight for those dollars.
Very interesting answers. Thank you, everyone. Our next question focuses on biking and walking in the county. The Washington Area Bicyclists Association wants the county to fund the construction of a bikeable, walkable network in 4 equity areas, equity focus areas. Wheaton, White Oak, Langley Park, and downtown Silver Spring. This proposal is $110 million over the next 6 years. One, do you support this proposal? And what else do you think the county executive can do in the next term to make walking and biking safer and to make more people use those modes? We will actually start right back with you, Councilmember Hucker.
Well, I think the Bike Master Plan provides a great guideline for us to do this, and the planning department and board deserve a lot of credit for putting that together. It's very ambitious, and most counties would be very fortunate to have anything like it. It's also very expensive. So there's at least $110 million that would be needed in the budget to build out the Tier 1 bicycle master plan projects in those equity areas, and much more to continue to build out the Bike Master Plan in the coming years. It's exactly, I think, the direction we need to go. We need to invest, take a transportation equity approach, meaning we need to get away from the bias of just making transportation investments in people who are lucky enough to have a car. We want to also encourage those who are lucky enough to have a car to leave their cars at home and give them safe alternatives, bikeways and sidewalks and trails to get from here to there so they can take transit to work. And we also need to greatly, I think, invest in transportation demand management and encouraging employers to invest in telework, both the equipment and the software like we have this year. We've all been forced to during Zoom. That's really showed the potential to get cars off our roads. And if cars are off our roads, people will take a lot more of their short trips through non-car modes. What was the rest of the question? Do I support it? Yes. Is it the direction we need to head? Yes.
Yeah.
And the Bike Master Plan provides the map of the investments in the future.
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to add on other ways to increase walking or biking?
Look at Forest Glen in my district. People don't have safe alternatives, so they get in their car to drive 2 blocks to pick up a half gallon of milk. That doesn't make any sense. We need to deeply invest in our sidewalks and bikeways to allow people to make their to leave their cars at home, especially for their short trips.
Great, thank you for that answer. County Executive Elrich.
Let me talk about some of the projects that we're actually doing. We're doing the Sandy Spring Bikeway project. We're doing the new Tuckerman Lane sidewalk project to improve safety around Herbert Hoover Middle School and Winston Churchill High School. We're doing the US 29 pedestrian bike improvements that are designed to improve access to the flash transit stations. We've added the addition of central and the eastern sections of the bicycle pedestrian priority improvements project for Veers Mill Road and Wheaton Central Business District. We've increased funding for safe routes to school improvements and sidewalk and curb replacements. We changed the scope of the Dale Drive shared path as a result of input from the community there, along with the Fenton Street cycle track project. And in FY 27 and 28, we've got funding for ADA guardrails, traffic signals, neighborhood calming things. So we've done I think a lot of interesting things, and we're doing more. I looked at what was going on in DC. I saw these cones popping up, not cones, but these little poles popping up. And I came back to my people and I said, can we do what they're doing in the district? Let's square the corners so we can square the corners so cars can't swing around them. So you now see in Montgomery County more and more of these poles popping up with the goal of calming traffic, narrowing roads, and squaring the corners. Those are things that we can do and can do effectively. I saw what they did on Forest Grove, where they put this little walkway in the roadway, and the county had a plan for a horrible tree destroying project over off of East-West Highway. And I went to my people and said, I don't want you to do this. Look at what you did on Forest Grove, put in the same kind of improvements there. I'm not going to prove you cutting down all these trees to put in a concrete sidewalk. This is what they're looking at doing now. So this is a high priority for me to do this. We've got a lot of money in these projects going forward. We're going to keep the money in the projects, and we're looking at every innovative way that we can do this. So the good thing about the little poles is I can do a whole lot of intersections with little poles because they're cheap.
Yeah, and the county obviously such a diverse, super urban, suburban, exurban, quite a lot going on there. Mr. Blair, how would you improve bikeability, walkability in the county?
So yes, I support the plan. And in fact, we've done the work, right? We have the 2018 Montgomery County Bicycle Master Plan that lays out in great detail how to connect the most important areas where the bicycle lane should be built. So I would commit to building at least 10 miles of tier 1 protected bicycle lanes each year and take an equity approach to that. But when I think about dedicated lanes for bikes, one of the things that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to work closely with the state, because clearly we need the State Highway Administration consent to do a lot of this. And we need to make a better case to them. And so one of the things that I would do is I would make that case through adaptive traffic signal use. So we need to make our roads more efficient so that we can actually take a lane away for bicycles. And we could do that through these adaptive traffic signal use. They're essentially sensors that are in the roadway to automatically adjust the signal timing. So they basically reduce backups. Many cities across the country have rolled this kind of technology out. I know I was reading about it. They did in Seattle recently. Now, this is not a silver bullet. So this will not address all of our challenges. And in fact, if an intersection is already at max capacity, this won't help you. But that's not the case for many of our roads. And so we should be able to implement some of this technology so we can have better efficiency on our roads. It's something that's affordable. We can do it. And then that'll free up a lane that we can then use for bikes. Think about what happened on University Boulevard, right? We had it as a protected bike lane, and then the state highway took it away. So this might be a way that we can make a better case.
Great, thank you. We will talk about University Boulevard in a moment. Our next round, I'm sorry, no, I'm Councilmember Riemer, sorry about that. Jumping ahead of myself.
Thank you so much. Well, really appreciate the question. I've been the council's strongest leader on bikeability and walkability for a long time. We have a funding project that the county executive mentioned called the bicycle and pedestrian priority areas. I'm the author of that, and it now has millions of dollars in the budget every year for construction of critical bike and safety, pedestrian safety infrastructure. I've led the charge to revise our development rules so that when new development goes in, walkers and bikers and transit users are prioritized, not just people who are driving. I'm the co-author of transportation demand management legislation that development must use to moderate its trips. That was legislation I worked on with Councilmember Berliner. I also co-led with him the creation of our Vision Zero program. And I've collaborated with our Vision Zero activist community for years, including taking the lead on legislation to reduce speed limits on neighborhood roads that the county executive has never really implemented, and to build protected bike lanes, to push the state to implement better design standards. So I've been working really hard on all of these initiatives. I love the WABA equity-focused network model. We need to build these networks in our aging in urban areas like Silver Spring and Wheaton and Long Branch. And I think that a lot of the folks who are biking to a job in a restaurant are not seen. They are not seen. People think about the bikers as, you know, affluent young folks riding to Metro, and we need to make safe streets for them too. But what about the workforce? What about the folks riding at 2 a.m. trying to get home from a restaurant? They have been a number of the fatalities in this county, and they deserve to be safe. And we should make them have access to a safe trip to work. I've worked in restaurants. I know what it's like not to have another option. To, you know, those employees need to be able to get to work safely. And so we've got to do our job for them. And that's what bike safety is also about.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely quite an industry, and you know, like you said, not always great answers to get home late at night. So our next round will be a lightning round, just 5 quick questions. We'll use you know, thumbs up or thumbs down, and we'll all just go at the same time. Our first question is on ride-on, which fares have been free, obviously, since the pandemic in March 2020. Do you support making ride-on fares permanently free for all riders? And Mark, can't see your hand.
Jordan, of course, they're free because the council made them free.
Free because the council made them free. All right, great. Next question. Parking prices, increasing the cost of driving with parking prices has been shown to be one of the more effective ways to decrease the amount that people drive. Would you be open to considering policies like more expensive parking that might impose a higher cost on driving?
Limiting parking.
Limiting, all right, great. Bus lanes. Dedicated bus only lanes improve travel reliability for riders by making sure they don't get stuck in traffic. The Flash BRT, like we mentioned earlier, on Colesville does not have dedicated lanes at the moment. Would you support converting a general purpose regular driving lane into a dedicated bus lane on Colesville or other state highways? All right, we all agreed, great. This one, this has been one of my favorite pandemic topics, is streeteries, which the county has set up in dining areas in Bethesda and Wheaton on a pilot basis. Should the county make these streeteries a permanent feature? All right, great. And should the county encourage setting these up in other areas of the county? All right, and in the future, should restaurants have to pay for that space?
It depends.
Some mixed response there. All right. You know, actually, I'm kind of curious about David. You said yes. Why do you feel that way?
I think it's a tough one. I mean, one of my visions is like we need to do everything we can to support our local businesses, right? That's clearly an important thing. I'm also aware that many restaurants don't have access to a streetery. And so I was just trying to think about how we make that equitable across the board.
Gotcha. Anyone else want to explain the answer? Maybe Tom or?
I was just going to say, these are public streets, and, you know, we want, like, it's one thing for us to create a enhanced public space. And I think in that case, we're lucky the restaurants are there, and I don't think we would want to charge them. But I think that there could be ways to expand this opportunity around the county where, maybe it's smaller and more targeted, and maybe a restaurant, would like to have the opportunity to do something where the county just doesn't have the resources. So I would be open to different ways to do it. But, the ones that we have, I wouldn't envision charging a restaurant to use Woodmont or Norfolk or, Ellsworth or whatever. No, thanks.
Can I join? Look, so I'm not interested in making money on things like this. And I've looked at a couple of them. I've asked my people to leave the street areas alone in these areas because they can actually manage the traffic on the rest of the road and still have a streetery. One of my favorite things I ever saw and would like to, see more of here is in San Francisco. They do these parklets and they build these little islands, little mini stages that take up the width of a parking space and take up a couple of parking spaces. And the restaurants put outdoor dining on those parklets, and they're nice. They often have planters on them. They're mobile. Sometimes they move them and shift them up and down the block. I think they're really nice, innovative ways of not using the entire block, but adding additional space that a business can operate in. So I think if you do it right, you can still maintain the mobility that people are going to need to get around these areas. Oftentimes you sacrifice some parking, but we have so many garages, particularly in our urban areas, that it's not like you can't walk to a garage and then get to where you want to go eat. So I think there's a balance we can strike, and I like them.
Sure. Yeah, they've been quite the respite during the pandemic. Tom, do you have anything to add to that? Or
I think everything's been said, but like most things, especially new programs, location matters a lot. There's certainly plenty of places that wouldn't necessarily make sense. But yeah, I'd like to see them expanded, and I've consistently voted to stand them up and expand them.
For sure. My last quick fire question, not a thumbs up, thumbs down, but just a quick answer if you can for me. How do you guys get around? We'll start with Mr. Blair.
Locally, we drive to DC. We take the metro.
Yeah, a little tougher in Potomac to hop on fence, I suppose. Councilmember Riemer.
Well, it depends on where I'm going, I guess. I try to organize my life to take as short trips as I can. I would say I certainly drive. I'm not going to confuse anybody about that. If I want to get to Rockville from Tacoma Park, for work, unfortunately, as a council member, I just don't necessarily have as much time as I'd like to spend commuting, and I need to drive. I have been a bike commuter from Tacoma Park to Rockville also. When I've had time on my schedule, I'll ride my bike, and I have taken transit. I've taken bus. There's many ways to get there, but I think the goal is for everyone to have options. That's what we want. It's not that everyone has to ride the bus. We're not saying everyone must take one mode of transportation. We're often accused of that. Oh, you want everyone to ride the bus everywhere, but you don't ride. No, we want everyone to have good options. That's what we want. And we believe that when the options are good options, people will take advantage of the best ones, and public transportation will often be that choice.
Councilmember Hucker.
I bike where I can. I take Metro bus and ride-on and Metro rail where I can, and I drive my electric Nissan Leaf where I can.
Electric car owner. County Executive Elrich.
So I've had an electric vehicle since 2013. So I drive that if I'm going to Rockville. And if I'm going downtown to DC, I take transit. And when the Purple Line comes and I can get up to Bethesda from Tacoma Park on transit quickly, then I'm going to do that too. Unfortunately for my life, going into the office is not the end of the day. It's not unusual for me to go to the office, drive someplace else, and someplace else, and then go home. So I don't have a simple driving path that I can count on.
Sure, always interesting to hear. And actually working on an electric vehicle story right now, so I'll ask you guys about that later.
Got one too, by the way.
Now our next portion is going to be about minute-long answers, touching on a number of topics. First, starting with WMATA, we talked a little bit about housing and how we should talk about getting more housing around transit. what should specifically the county do to promote more development around current Metro rail stations? We'll start with Councilmember Hucker.
We think we need to build more incentives into our master plan. To do that, we need to work constructively with WMATA to push that forward. We need to fight for the funding from the state and incentive and make it a priority in the county budget to build the infrastructure that we need to support that development.
And then we'll go with County Executive Elrich.
So you have to work with WMATA like we're doing in the White Flint area. We think this is really important. But we're actually, there is new federal rules that govern, actually are going to govern WMATA and govern metro stations. And it has to do with housing. And it essentially means that, we've always been handicapped because WMATA has to put a property on the market for highest and best use. So that means, like, if you can put a 20-story building there, you're supposed to put a 20-story building there, and you got to value it at that. And that makes everything more expensive. There is now a way that governments can proactively get access to property and not have to get access at highest and best use. So we're actually having a meeting on this. We're going to see what this opens up, because assuming this opens up some interesting possibilities for us, we'd love to be able to do it. I don't want to pay WMATA's price for, a high-rise building on top of the metro right now. But if I could bring the price down, then that would be attractive. But I would say, metro, right on top of metro, if you're going to ask a developer, what's the best use of the piece of property right on top of metro, they're going to tell you it's commercial. Because, the walk shed rule is it's a quarter-mile walk shed for commercial and a half-mile walk shed for residential. And Tyson's Corner's policies are they focus the commercial development in the quarter-mile walk shed and focus the residential in the half-mile, because people just will walk farther to a house.
Right.
So I think their sites are big enough you can kind of have combinations of both.
For sure. Mr. Blair, how would you address this issue?
We can provide developers incentives till we're blue in the face, but that's not going to change what they do. This is about jobs, right? And not only do we have less jobs here, we have lower paying jobs, and so developers recognize that's where people want to live. In fact, I'll share a stat with you, and this is incredibly alarming. Over the last 10 years, we've lost 35% of our IT jobs. I mean, think about that. If you threw a dart right at a map of the United States, where that dart hit, you'd say, well, IT jobs have to be up, right? We're in the information age. But yeah, we've made policy choices. We've done things that have driven those jobs away. And so until we start growing the economy here, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get these developers to build the kind of housing that we need.
And Councilmember Riemer.
Yeah, our economic development is a major factor that is dragging down our success in redeveloping all of the land around metro stations, with the exception of downtown Bethesda. And the council enacted a master plan that Marc Elrich voted against as a council member that has indeed led to rebuilding downtown Bethesda. And it's a little bit rocky right now with all the construction, but as soon as we get through that, it is going to be an absolutely amazing place. It's already awesome, but it's going to be spectacular. We have to put the right zoning in place, which we're doing. County executive is always opposed doing that. We have to figure out how to get people to reduce their driving and use more public transportation around metro. Obviously, we have to rebuild all of these roads. That's, what I was saying earlier is that what's holding us back is we have these highways coming through our metro oriented areas. If you go to Virginia, what you'll see, you come out of the metro and you're on in Rosslyn, Ballston, you're in a walkable urban area. You come out in Montgomery County, you're on a state highway. It's not safe. It's not conducive to creating the kind of community that we need to thrive in this county. We've got to tear up Rockville Pike and rebuild it as an urban street where it's walkable, it's bikeable, it's got development and trees and urban parks. That's our mission in this county. And we will be competitive, much more competitive when we do that. We will attract employers, we will attract young workers, we will retain our older executives, keeps everything together. So I am relentlessly focused on a vision for our future that preserves our rural areas, preserves our suburban communities, but builds us the city centers that we need, especially around Metro. That's the ticket.
And Councilmember Hucker.
Sorry, I thought I was first on this question.
Oh, of course. Has everyone gone in that case? Getting mixed up. Here we go. And of course, we're not going to get through this without talking about 495 and 270, of course, the toll lane project that is a saga, if you will. And if you haven't followed that, well, there's plenty on WAMU.org and GCS.com. Do you support or oppose the proposal to widen parts of I-495 and I-270 to add 4 express toll lanes? Why or why not? And how would you show that support or opposition to the state? We will start with Councilmember Riemer.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I do not support widening the Beltway through Silver Spring. And the county has never supported that. But the county has long supported widening the American Legion Bridge and 270. It's in our adopted master plans. And I do support doing that. There aren't other ways to get to Virginia. Virginia is a bottleneck. It is holding back our economic progress. And if there was an easier transit alternative, then that would be acceptable to say, use the transit alternative. But how do you go from Rockville to Fairfax, to the Dulles corridor? There isn't really a good alternative. And I'm a strong believer in building out our MARC system to be a commuter rail. And I'm a strong believer in expanding our metro. I'd like to take the Red Line to Germantown. These are a lot of really critical mega projects that we need to get done. But at the same time, we've got to be able to get to the economic heart of this region. And I think it's really not appreciated how in the last 30 years, all of the economic heart of this region has moved out of DC and into Virginia, and it's moved out of Montgomery County and into Virginia. And now it is in Virginia. And we need to be a connected region. We have to be connected to Virginia. There's only one crossing. It's the American Legion Bridge on a highway. So let's build a transit connection to Virginia using that road. Absolutely. Let's have a toll system. I wouldn't support doing it as a free expansion, which is where a lot of the critics of that are saying it should be free. I don't think that's the right way to go. But, at the end of the day, I think we've got to have that connection. And this is not exurban sprawl. This is the core of the region here. The Beltway to Virginia from 270 and up 270. I don't think we have to widen the footprint. I want to be clear about that. You can add these lanes within almost entirely the existing walls that you see on these roads. So we're not talking about bulldozing forests here and expanding the footprint that you experience when you're on these roads today. And I want to say north to Frederick, I wouldn't widen. I think you can do reversible lanes. I think that's acceptable, reversible toll lanes. But I think when you get into that core, when you're talking about how do you get to Virginia, this is a regional connection. It's the whole seaboard. I mean, we're talking about people going from New York to Richmond, to Atlanta. You've got to have a connection. We've got to do this. There's really no way around it. So yes, I worked with my colleagues. We supported a deal with the governor. And guess what? We got hundreds of millions of dollars committed to build a mega transit project. The county executive has $170 million in his new capital budget from our deal, $170 million from our deal. And that's just the start. That's just a down payment. We're going to build a transit mega project in this county funded by that project. And that's the kind of politics I support, is a win-win, both and not just one or the other. Thanks.
You County Executive Elrich, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. Look, it was my idea to even do the American Legion Bridge. When the governor and I first both spoke at the same breakfast, and he told everybody what he was going to do. And I got up after him. I said, if you were serious, you'd start at the American Legion Bridge. Nobody starts at the back end of a bottleneck and works its way toward where the plug is. You start at where the plug is. And a month later, the governor switched his position and said he was going to do the American Legion Bridge. So what that told me is he hadn't thought about it much, and he hadn't really talked to his transportation people, because they would have told him and did tell him the exact same thing that I told him. The council's position for years, going back to Governor O'Malley, was 2 reversible lanes down the middle of I-270. That's what they could have done. Greg Slater knows they could have done it. This is a political thing for the governor. His goal was to build the most expensive project in the universe, and he succeeded in doing that. Well, he succeeded in getting down that road, but we didn't need that. And I don't agree with Hans that it should be a toll lane. The Woodrow Wilson Bridge was built without tolls, if you don't notice that. This could have been done without tolls. The governor's got enough surplus money in his budget this year. He could have paid for it without tolls. But going reversible was critical. Agreeing to anything without getting the governor to agree to what he was going to do north of the ICC was nuts. Because even one of the principals of Transurban said it's going to be a major disaster when the expanded lanes reach the ICC. It is a congestion nightmare going south in the morning. It's going to be a congestion nightmare going north. We were fighting for that. I was fighting. Hans is right. He sold the county out. He's happy about it. We were fighting. I was fighting for the letter that the council had agreed to, which called for what we were trying to get the state to do for us. Everything that he thinks he got are things we had already gotten an agreement with Greg. So he just accepted Slater's agreement. But I will say there was not an agreement with the governor. This agreement is not in the deal with Transurban. The only promise of money that's absolute is the $60 million for planning, and the $300 million would come to us out of toll revenues over an unspecified time. So I can't build this project on $300 in toll revenues if I don't know what those revenues are going to be. I can't even bond against it today without knowing what those revenues are going to be. So there was a better way to do this.
And I'm told our timer broke, so I'll be doing it manually here, but just FYI. So anyways, Mr. Blair,
I can do
495. I'm sorry.
Jordan, I can do the timer.
Okay.
And I can put in the chat when we've hit 1 minute, or I can jump in, whichever you would prefer.
Okay. Yeah, if you just want to jump in, that'd be fine.
How could a digital timer break?
Great question.
Technology.
Okay,
Anyways,
so I will put in the chat to the hosts and panelists when we've hit 1 minute, and I'll let folks wrap up their remarks to go a few seconds over, and then I will hop in and interrupt. So apologies for that.
So, Jordan, so thank you for the question. So we've been discussing the need to address the congestion on 270, the bottleneck at American Legion Bridge for as far as I can remember. The managed lane project is rapidly moving forward. I think it made sense to eliminate the project on the east section of the Beltway, given the impact it was going to have on the parks and schools in those neighborhoods. But now it's the job of the county executive. So it'd be my job to protect the interests of those being impacted. So the things that I would focus on is one, making sure that the plan that the state ultimately moves forward with doesn't infringe on private property. We got to make sure that a P3 contract is financially responsible, right? Think about what happened with the Purple Line and how taxpayers ended up, really holding the bag at the end of the day. What are the tolls going to be? We need to make sure the tolls are reasonable and that those funds fund our public transit initiatives. But I want to take a step back and think about the bigger issue here, right? So what's part of the root cause of this? So pre-pandemic, it was estimated that 200,000 people were leaving Montgomery County every morning for jobs, mostly going to DC. And then firstly, 200,000 people were driving into the county each morning. So think about first responders and teachers. I think it's like 50% of our teachers and first responders don't live in the county because it's so expensive.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Hucker.
How long do we get? 1 minute?
1 minute.
Geez, okay.
Yeah. Good
So
luck.
I've been building effective coalitions my whole career, and that's why I worked with WABA and the Sierra Club and ACT and 20 environmental groups to build a huge coalition, went to the Board of Public Works, proposed an alternative route that was supported by our planners and MDOT that would avoid a federal lawsuit and actually reduce congestion. Was very proud that we were able to get them to take the northern portion of the Beltway out of their plan because of all the advocacy that I had set up. Yes, the council has been for fixing the American Legion Bridge and fixing 270 for a long time. It should have been started north of 370 where that would really matter for congestion relief. But the reason it's not being started there under a P3 is because it's driven by a profit margin, and that's not the most profitable section. That's one more reason why you don't, if you want to do this right, you don't do it under a unaccountable P3, you do it with public dollars and real transparency and oversight. I do have real problems with how Councilmember Riemer went around our committee and the council to support Hogan's highway plan. He got nothing for it, to set the record straight. We'll never see that money. No one believes we'll ever see that money. You don't have to believe me.
Thank you. That's time.
Oh, you're kidding.
I know. I put in the chat 30 seconds, so I can do that.
The warning. It's so hard without the clock now. Okay.
I know. I'm sorry, Jeremiah.
We'll never see that money. I got 3 good reasons we'll never see that money. No one believes we will.
Thank you. And we're coming up close to time, so I want to try to get as many questions in here as possible. One of the things that we've seen a little bit in the Q&A, and one of the things we really want to talk about is Vision Zero and safety, traffic safety, pedestrian, bike safety. Name a top transformative policy or infrastructure project that you would pursue during your first year in office to push Montgomery towards achieving Vision Zero. We'll start with Councilmember Riemer.
A infrastructure project that I would push to promote Vision Zero. That's a great question. I mean, first of all, I'd get the purple line done right. You know, I would make sure we don't single track it like the Marc Elrich proposed, a disastrous idea. You know, finish the trail, get the trails done, all the walk sheds done correctly into the purple line. I think that should be a really high priority. I think we got to get the whole purple line corridor built correctly, you know, and we need to layer into it a new vision for affordable housing and walkability and bikeability. I think that's, you know, the Purple Line corridor is an amazing, powerful potential source of our future prosperity. It connects the University of Maryland to Silver Spring, to Bethesda and NIH and the whole 270 corridor. You know, we got to get it right. And that means investing in the right infrastructure along the line, finishing the Metropolitan Branch Trail, connecting to the Capitol Crescent Trail, rebuilding the streets around the station so that they're safe and they're walkable. And it means buying housing. We got to buy the existing housing that's there, put it under nonprofit ownership, and redevelop it over the long term as a long-term affordable, high quality housing.
Thank you. Mr. Blair, how would you address, or what would be your one project or policy?
Well, I mean, so clearly we need to make much more progress on Vision Zero. When I look at the numbers, it doesn't look like we've made much meaningful impact on the number of fatalities over the past many years. And so with 1 minute, one thing that I would focus on, we've got to fix our mid-block bus stops. I see this all the time. We put a bus stop in the middle of a road where there's no crosswalk, and we've seen fatalities. And this is something that we can simply do either with hawk signals to for those pedestrians so they can get safely across, or we need to move those bus stops to a crosswalk, because it's just not reason. And actually, Vision Zero assumes this. Vision Zero assumes that people will make mistakes, and we need to build systems that accommodate those mistakes so that we actually get to zero fatalities.
Thank you so much, County Executive Elrich. And you're still on mute, by the way.
I never proposed single tracking. I said when you get to the entrance to the tunnel, the train goes straight in, parks, and when it's time to leave, which should be 2 minutes later, it switches from an inside lane to an outside lane and heads back to Silver Spring. And I did that so that we could speed up providing the bicycle path that was supposed to be on the Capitol Crescent Trail. That's what I proposed, not single tracking the Purple Line. But I will say that, you know, the most important things, I got an agreement from the state to let us extend those little coney things out onto state highways. The more we can do that, and they were like, you know, they don't want us to go crazy, but we could identify places where there are issues with cars turning and accessibility where we could actually make a difference. And I would like to do that. I'd also like to smarten our lights along those roads, because I realize they stay at the same lumens regardless of what's going on. There are sensors that can be put on lights that if a pedestrian steps into the street, would increase the voltage of the light so that they're well lit, whether they're crossing where they should or they shouldn't, at least they should be visible.
Thank you.
And this is a way of increasing visibility.
Thanks for that answer. Councilmember Hucker.
A couple things. I would build these projects as well as the highway projects with project labor agreements, with local hiring provisions, and community benefits agreement, number one. So we're making the biggest investment we can in our community and our workers. If I had to pick one, I'd say the Capitol Crescent Trail Tunnel, which is very important to not just our county, but the whole region. The county executive delayed it for 2 more years in the last CIP, and I had to work with Councilmember Friedson to restore them for that. It was extraordinary. The Transportation Secretary of the State wrote to us saying, hey, you can't just slow down this project. It's a state priority. Here's 6 sources of revenue that you could apply. And if you're too busy to apply for these grants, I'll put my own staff on applying. And the county still hasn't even responded to the secretary's letter. We leave all this money on the table from the state and the region and the feds all the time. And that's why we need a new change and a new direction that invests in these projects. We also need to give MDOT the tools it needs to implement Vision Zero. And you start with the Safe Access for All Roads Act, sponsored by Delegate Charkoudian, and the Vision Zero Implementation Act, sponsored by Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr in Annapolis. Those are 2 key priorities to make sure State Highway is really a partner with us. And we need a new governor who believes in Vision Zero too.
Thank you for those answers. If you all have a few minutes, we're wrapping up here. Wanted to quickly touch on policing and traffic enforcement. Our question is, do you support removing police from some or all traffic enforcement? And how do you balance the need for traffic enforcement and equity while in office? We'll start with County Executive Elrich.
That is a really good question. So I think when you're dealing with speeding, reckless driving, and things where people can die, I can't imagine just letting somebody go through multiple stoplights, for example, and saying the police can't do anything about that, or driving 60 miles an hour through downtown Bethesda. What I am interested in is outfitting police cars with other cameras that can take pictures. If it's a blown taillight, or a turn signal that's not working, or God forbid, an unlit license plate. Those kind of things where the officers can take pictures. And since these cars have license plates, they can actually send the tickets to people without stopping the person. This gets us away from pretextual stops. It gets us away from officers questioning people and saying, where are you going? Do you have a body in your trunk? All that really embarrassing stuff that happens sometimes. So I think there needs to be a blend. I wouldn't want a civilian trying to stop a speeder or potentially drunk driver, but I'd be more than happy to have civilians or police taking pictures of vehicles that violate repair standards and not having the police involved in that. I think it would take the police out of a whole lot of the work they do, and that would be a good thing.
Mr. Blair.
So I agree with much of what the county executive said as it relates to needing police for, such as the examples of drinking, driving, or reckless driving, those types of things. But there's so many reasons that we could leverage technology, and I'm certainly open to that, right? And so whether it's more efficient, it's less costly, certainly you eliminate all the bias from using technology. And the added benefit is, you think about it, the Department of Transportation is going to have some unique insights, and they'll understand intuitively where the most dangerous corridors are and how that we can locate where those automatic cameras should be. We did a study here in 2015, and it was suggested these cameras were wildly successful. I think it was something like almost 60% reduction in the likelihood of someone speeding, like a 20% reduction in likelihood of someone getting in an accident. So I think we can use cameras, and kind of going back to that Vision Zero plan. This is just one of the tools in our toolbox that we could use to get to that goal of 0 pedestrian fatalities.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Hucker.
This is a topic I'm really passionate about, Jordan. That's why I led the effort to introduce the first state legislation in the nation to allow us to have automated enforcement of distracted driving. Unfortunately, after We got the county to support the bill. County executive allowed one of his staff, Captain Didone, to go to Annapolis and testify against our own bill to undermine our position in front of our delegation. That would never happen under my administration. Second, we need police officers to focus on what only police officers can do, like pull over drunk drivers and reckless drivers. And we don't have enough police officers doing that right now because we've had such a hard time. We have such huge attrition and have had such a hard time recruiting them. So we need just like we do in our behavioral health space, we need our police officers only doing what police officers can do and need to use automated enforcement. And in the case of the other example, social workers to do a lot of the other work that now police officers are dragged into doing.
And then among our last questions, what would you, yes. Oh, I am so sorry. I'm looking at the clock and not the Councilman Riemer. Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah, thank you. This is a topic that matters a lot to me. If you read the Washington Post, you'll see my leadership on this issue, putting it front and center, not only as a matter of transportation safety, but also racial justice. There's been a past pattern of excessive traffic stops for Black and brown drivers. And what we know is that Black and brown drivers, they contribute, their share of car crashes is much smaller than their share of traffic stops. So a lot of the traffic stops are not happening to promote safety. There's something else going on there. And I think that's wrong. So we've got to get out of biased traffic stops that lead to all kinds of resentment and justifiable anger about policing. And we can do that by substituting in targeted ways with automated enforcement instead of personal enforcement, and have our police officers able to spend time focusing more on actual crime. It takes thousands of traffic stops to find something really significant. And I'm not saying we wouldn't do any traffic stops. Please don't get me wrong, but police should focus on actual dangerous driving behavior and real suspicion suspicion of real crime, and not the broad fishing net. And we can accomplish that. It's not exactly easy, but the Police Advisory Commission, which I led the council to adopt, has recommended that approach now. We've received their report just this week, and we should take action.
Thank you. If we have time for 2 more questions, is everyone okay? Run up on time. All right. Really quickly, wanted to talk about trails. Project like the Purple Line Trail, which has multiple stakeholders, the Met Branch Trail, which is a MCDOT project, Capitol Crescent, there's a number of trails, obviously. How will you work to expedite the process so that Montgomery County can complete their portion of the regional trail network, which the council has agreed to pass at a faster pace? Let's start with County Executive Elrich.
Find more money. I mean, let's be real about this. I mean, all these things are competing for scarce dollars. And some of those scarce dollars go to schools, some of them go to transit, some of them go to affordable housing, and none of those things are adequately funded. One of the things that we've talked about is trying to prioritize either major projects that we think have high levels of connectivity and where we can make improvements. The other thing is focusing on projects that, at least in the beginning, that would actually take people off the road, where we're looking at commuter paths, things close to urban areas, where putting bike lanes that serve nearby neighborhoods or paths that serve nearby neighborhoods would give people an actual viable alternative to driving short distances. So with scarce dollars, I'd probably focus on things that are proximate and which have an opportunity to reduce driving, and then limited funding and expansion, maybe a slower expansion of things that are recreational.
So Riemer.
Sorry, Jordan, would you repeat the question? You're on mute.
Thanks. We've got all these trail projects going on.
Oh yes, thank you.
And how would you move those things forward?
Yeah, well, I think the executive branch and the county executive has not been assertive enough, particularly on a couple of major specific roadblocks to completing the region's most important trail. And that is the Metropolitan Branch and Capitol Crescent Trail, which is the heart of a regional biking network, a bicycle beltway, so that you can bike around the whole region. And there are several roadblocks. One of them is getting agreement in downtown Silver Spring for the crossing over Georgia Avenue. And I think that there's not been sufficient attention from MCDOT to getting that done. And of course, the other is coming through downtown Bethesda. And we've had to fight repeatedly to put that funding back in. I'm glad Councilmember Hucker joined with me and Councilmember Friedson to actually make that happen. It was a tough fight. That's the highest used connection point in probably the whole Washington, certainly in Montgomery County. So we've got to just make it a higher priority, make it a bigger focus. I've been proud to lead the council to increase our funding for hard surface trails and natural surface trails. There are lots of connections we can build.
Mr. Blair.
When I was in business, we had a Catholic hospital system that was one of our clients. And when you'd walk in the front door, the corporate offices around the wall said, no margin, no mission. Meaning, if we didn't manage our finances, we couldn't pursue our mission. Their mission obviously was taking care of patients. But I think of Montgomery County, I think of our mission about how we love wide open spaces, our parks, our trails. But we can't pursue that mission if we're not taking care of our finances. And right now, we're really struggling to pay for things. And if you look at the IRS data for the last 10 years, we've had $5.2 billion of net tax migration. So said another way, if you added up all the W-2s of the folks coming into the county and you subtracted those leaving, we have a deficit of $5.2 billion. That's having a devastating impact on our local economy, right? Because our local income tax, that's our second biggest source of revenues, right? 3.2%. And so we've got to reverse that trend. We need to create jobs here and affordable housing here so people stop leaving so we can fund things like the trails. Because I'll tell you, it's one of the things that my wife and I love to do with our kids. We take them down to the C&O Canal. We love hiking. And we can't, that is a priority of ours. And I'd look to figure out how to fund that.
Thank you so much. And Councilmember Hucker.
I'm a big supporter of our trails. It's interesting to see. I certainly agree with everything that was said about the Capitol Crescent Trail and the Met Branch Trail, which has been stuck for 20 years. But I want to also point out that the planning department actually tried to map out recently all the people's choice trails that people on their own are building with their feet to get from where they live to our parks, to our metro stations, to our bus stops, because there's not already a trailer or sidewalk there. And I participated with the planning department to do that. It was really interesting. I got that on one of the broadcast news stations with a reporter who followed me. Obviously, people wouldn't be doing this if we had sidewalks and trails where we need them to be. But people are voting with their feet, literally, and creating more of these. I absolutely agree. We need to take advantage of the funding opportunities offered by the Council of Governments. And the county exec says, find the money. Yes, the money's in Annapolis, the money's in Washington, and other counties are getting it. They have lobby firms there. Prince George's has 3. They used to have 4, bringing home money every year to Prince George's County, and we have none. We have to get in the game and act like a major jurisdiction and get our share of federal and state tax dollars to fund amenities like this.
And then our last question, which some people have asked about and I think is really important, so I want to get it in, is the bus has obviously been such a lifeline for so many people during the pandemic. What would you do to what would you do to ensure Ride-On provides better bus service? And we'll start with County Executive Elrich.
Well, I mean, part of the problem with Ride-On is that it's stuck in traffic, which is why people who think that you can get better service out of Ride-On, if Ride-On's in all the congestion that all the cars are in, it's not going to happen. And it's one of the problems, and that makes one of the bigger problems with Ride-On, is that it basically draws on people who are not choice riders, people who, but for Ride-On, can't get anywhere, and people who are choice riders aren't going to sit in traffic in a bus, which actually goes slower than a car goes. So my goal is to build as much of the BRT system as possible. Hans is wrong. We actually are focusing on the major routes: 29, Veers Mill, 355, a spur to Westfield Mall, because we connects to a bus we hope will go to Virginia, the Quarter Cities Transit Way, and 355 all the way up to Clarksburg. Those are the major routes. If we can build that, we would take the ride-on bus system and convert it to a feeder system. And we'd probably use smaller circulator buses and basically go through neighborhoods, come out to the main line, put people on a main line and send them on their way to work, bring them back in the evening, get off a bus stop, get on one of the local shuttles and go through your neighborhood. That's what I would do.
Thanks. Councilmember Riemer.
Thanks. Well, I think we've got to get focused on how to improve ride-on service. And that has really slipped off of the agenda. There's been a lot of talk about fares lately. I've been working on that. But we've got to actually focus on how everyday ride-on service all over the county can be better, which is simply a matter of more reliability and more frequency and more predictability and a more understandable route network. And that is going to be a big priority for me. I want to say county executive's comments there about building all of the bus rapid transit. There's $170 million in the budget that he just delivered to us 3 weeks ago, $170 million from the P3 project, from the state, the Opportunity Lanes funding source. So I don't understand all this comment about, the money isn't there. He sent it to us in his budget. It's $170 million, and that's just a down payment. There will be more, and we're going to work it all out this spring with the governor and, get these finances all lined up.
Great, thank you. Mr. Blair.
I made a few comments on this on a different question, but as we think about the ride-on bus, we have full ownership and control of this. So this is an easy thing for us to fix. And as I mentioned, it's alarming that we saw our ridership decrease by 25% between 2012 and 2019. Clearly we need more people on ride-on. So again, making ride-on free all the time. Here's something that I saw in a recent survey too. Riders actually care as much about a mobile app and reliability as they do free fares. And so we've got to make sure that we're giving them as much technology as they can get from an Uber or a Lyft. And then the reimagining ride-on study that we're currently doing. This is critical. Clearly, I wish we would have done it years ago, but this is going to make it much easier because we have to reduce the amount of times that individuals are on the bus. And lastly, like how cool would it be if we start painting some of these extra lanes? I'm looking at 355 outside of our office here, right? And it doesn't really have rush hour traffic. So is there a lane there that we could dedicate to ride on right away so we can make meaningful changes soon?
Thank you so much. And Councilmember Hucker.
I'm really glad you brought this up. It's a great question. Long time, I've been to the bus deep times to our drivers. And I'm glad that we just passed increased pay for them because we had fallen behind our competitors in the region, particularly Metro. We need to do a few things. We need to complete the reimagining ride-on work because we largely are sending buses in the same routes that we have for 20 years, regardless of changes in commuting patterns and development. We need to keep ride-on free. I worked with Councilmember Glass and Riemer to led the effort as council president and TNE chair to keep them free this year. We finished a demographic study. We know our riders are disproportionately, overwhelmingly brown and black and average $35,000 a year. So if we either believe in racial equity and social justice or we don't. And raising bus fares, as the county exec has proposed, is contrary to both of those goals, also contrary to our climate commitment. And one side benefit you wouldn't have thought of, we've always had too many assaults on our drivers. And way too many riders that get in drunk, belligerent, high, whatever, and assault our drivers. Since buses became free, those assaults have almost been eliminated because we're not fighting. A driver isn't forced to fight with a rider over $1 anymore. Thank you.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I've certainly learned a lot about the county and on all your proposals as well. So thank you all for taking the time and the extra time as well. I want to remind everyone that the primary election is June 28th. The early voting period begins June 16th and runs through the 23rd of June. Thank you all so much for your time and your answers. And I'm going to turn it back over here to Jeremiah to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. Where's your Gibson?
Hey,
I'm a
I
Fender
think we
guy.
wanted.
I admire the Les Paul, but I'm a Fender guy, I gotta admit.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I think we wanted the candidates to have a 1-minute closing. That's cool with everybody.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll start
I'll
with
let you take it away, Jordan.
yeah, start with County Executive Elrich then.
So, we have to make a lot of tough decisions, whether you're on the council or whether you're going to be county executive. Telling people, for example, that you're just going to tear up a road and rebuild it tells me that you have no idea what it costs to do anything. Or that you're just going to blithely, run a metro out to Germantown, something that costs $400 million a mile. I mean, we have to live in the real world. We have to tell people what we think we can do, given the resources we have. I don't like resource limitations. And when something comes along and somebody like me suggests, let's look what Virginia's doing in order to raise funding and build infrastructure that we're not able to match, we ought to be willing to look at it instead of taking the approach of this is politically something we don't want to do. This is something we need to look at. I believe in solving problems, and I will work to solve problems. At the end of the day, whether it's me or anybody else, you cannot simply wish away the lack of money. This council has reduced capital funding on a regular basis, 10 million last year, 10 million this year. You can't say you're going to build more when you provide less. It's not possible.
Thank you so much. Mr. Blair.
So listening to the conversation today, there's so much that we all agree on, right? Whether it's, road safety, public transit, housing. But as you think about this race, we have plenty of ideas. We have great ideas. We have an incredibly talented community. I'd also suggest that we have the money with a $6 billion budget to fund many of our projects. What we're lacking is executive leadership to get things done. And that's what I've done my entire career. I've worked with teams. And as a leader, you quickly recognize you can never be the smartest person in the room. You surround yourself with those subject matter experts. You help them set a vision, you empower, you remove obstacles, you hold them accountable, and you get things done. You make meaningful progress. And that's what I've done my career. And that's what this county is missing. And that's what I'll bring as your county executive.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Riemer.
Thank you so much. This is a great forum tonight. A lot of terrific questions. I want to thank all of the organizations that have been building such a powerful advocacy campaign over the years to help us achieve victories on all of the issues that you've raised. These issues really matter to me so much. I said earlier, I've been a commuter by foot, by bike, by bus, by train, and by car. But this is really much more than a transportation discussion. What we're talking about is the future of this county. We're talking about building places that are great places to live. We're talking about how to build city centers along Rockville Pike or in downtown Silver Spring along the Purple Line, where we can attract companies, where young workers will have a place to live in this county, where our kids will actually want to come back to, where empty nesters will want to leave their larger house and get an awesome place to live next to restaurants and cultural attractions. That is the future that we have to build for our community. And if we don't do it, we don't have a great future. So creating walkable, smart growth, dense communities served by transit is job number one. There is really almost nothing more important that we can do. And it is part of an economic revitalization that we need to bring to our community.
Thank you so much. And Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Jordan. Thanks to everybody who put this together and is listening tonight. Look, for 30 years, I've worked as a community organizer, a nonprofit entrepreneur, a state lawmaker, and now as a county council member and a leader of the county council. For my whole career, I've been building coalitions to fight for transit and infrastructure and investment to make communities like this succeed. In 1999, I started working with Harry Sanders and Ben Ross to build support for the Purple Line. And the very next year, we were going door to door in Silver Spring, building opposition to an earlier proposal to widen the Beltway. I founded and built Progressive Maryland up, served on the board of Purple Line Now for years, and chaired the Purple Line caucus in the General Assembly, and worked for years with Governor O'Malley to win his approval. But as council president, I've had to work with Congressman Brown and many others to urge Secretary Buttigieg to fund our projects that he wasn't even aware of, because we're not lobbying him at all at a time of historic investment from the federal government. And while it's not a bike issue, I pulled together federal lawmakers and business leaders from the 10 largest counties to pressure Governor Hogan to free up $1 billion from the rainy day fund for grants and tax cuts for our residents and small businesses. If I can do that as a council member, you can imagine the revenue I could raise as your county executive. We need a county executive with the skills and the track record to build the coalitions necessary to deliver comprehensive, progressive results. Thank you all for your advocacy.
And thank you all for your answers. I'll send it back to Jeremiah, who will wrap us up.
Awesome. So Daniel.
Let me quickly say thank you to Jordan let's give a round of applause to Jordan for moderating a great panel today. Let me also thank all of our candidates who took the time out of their busy schedules to be with us tonight. It is a hectic couple of weeks you got ahead, and we want to let you know that we really appreciate the moment you shared with us, and we look forward to following up. There's a lot of statements and energy, and we look forward to following up with all the candidates and continuously discussing some of the policies that were mentioned tonight. And so once again, thank you to all of our candidates. Thank you to Jordan. Let me also thank, before we wrap up, let me thank Jane from Coalition for Smarter Growth for being an awesome partner in this initiative tonight. Let me also thank our co-sponsors, Young People for Progress, Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets, Tacoma Park Mobilization, Greater Washington, Jews United for Justice. Let me close by also thanking Peter Gray, who is an amazing advocate over here at WABA. So thank you, Peter, for helping us put all of this together. Everyone have a good night, and let's keep the momentum forward, and let's move Montgomery forward. So thank everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Daniel, there's my smart trip card. I know you wanted to see it.